What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation, and today, K-State fans? Welcome in to another edition of Kuz's Corner. On tap today here, we are going to talk about the exciting world and chaotic world of college football conference realignment and hopefully fit in some K-State football along the way. I'm joined today and very happy to be joined today by a special guest, Mr. Tim Fitzgerald. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Yeah, there's no problem. We're going to be interrupted by dogs. She just left the room. I did go find something to bark at, but that's okay.
No worries, man. Just real quick, most of my listeners probably already know who you are, but just in case, will you please let everyone know where they can find you at?
Yeah, I'm the publisher of GoPowerCat.com, the Kansas State site on the 24/7 Sports Network, and I have been in this space since basically 1995, helping a newspaper start up a Kansas State sports magazine. I left the traditional sports journalism space, and then in '98 I started my own company. Was one of the founding sites on the Rivals Network. So I've been doing this kind of corner of journalism for 25 years. So I'm an old fart.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll try to follow your work. I really enjoy your daily deliveries on YouTube, and I know you've been really trying to stay on top of this conference realignment stuff, just like the rest of us, which obviously the reason I decided to do this live is because this stuff is changing so fast that by the time I do a video, pre-recorded, get it edited, uploaded, everything could change. So I thought, man, we're going to have to go live with this. But I'm not sure if you've had a chance to check the we were kind of talking off air, and I don't know if you've had a chance to talk or check the latest news, but basically all hell's breaking loose, or has broken loose. Late last night, for those of you who may not be aware, Arizona State President Michael Crow, I guess, got cold feet about leaving the Pac-12. They said there were some shenanigans during the Board of Regents meeting last night. He was basically pushing, my understanding, for Arizona to leave on their own, did not want to go with them. The board was all on board with them leaving and going to the Big 12, but I guess he's basically, depending on which side of the equation you're on, he's either the savior or the enemy here, right?
Yeah.
he could be helping to save the Pac-12, but the enemy of his board and probably the boosters too, from what I understand. So
no, I don't know.
What's your thoughts on it? Yeah, go ahead.
Arizona education, how the board interacts with their presidents, and I know he's had successes not related to academics, and whether you're all in on. I got a dog walking around. If you're all in on what he's done with the online stuff, and it's the whole thing. But their athletics has fallen off the end of the earth, and there's no reason why Arizona State should be this bad in athletics, at least the most visible sports. But they are, and you can see why. The leadership of that school doesn't care particularly about athletics, doesn't understand the role of athletics. And Kuz, this has been my experience with a lot of the Pac-12. This was my concern with trying to invite in Pac-12 schools. And so when I talk about cultural fits, I'm not talking about liberal, conservative, anything political. I'm talking about, do you understand the role of college athletics in the greater picture of higher education? And they don't understand the front porch. They don't understand the purpose of it. They don't embrace it. They don't seem to get that it's a big part of your campus culture. And he's a perfect example of it. And like I said, I don't know the politics of this, but it's obvious they need to move to the Big 12, to everyone apparently but him. And I wonder if this might help shorten his rope there, because this would be a colossal decision not to join the Big 12 if the Pac-12 is indeed totally collapsing, which I think we all agree it will. This would be a redefining moment in Arizona State history if they're left out of realignment, and it would crush many aspects of the university.
Yeah, it looks like it. There were actually some signs that the Pac-12 may actually pull this thing together this morning at their CEO meeting, which is the president's meeting, is the way I understand it. They were all going to look at this deal, potentially even sign a grant of rights. There were reports out this morning from various media outlets saying, hey, they're going to salvage this thing last minute. The Arizona might even be on board with salvaging it, which is complete opposite of what Jason Shear's been saying, who I really trust on this, by the way. He's been on top of this from the beginning. And then just a couple minutes before you and I came on, Pete Thamel came out and said it looks like the Pac-12 can't land a plane because the Big Ten has come into the equation now, as everybody kind of thought, and they're looking to nab Oregon and Washington. So now they're putting the brakes on. So it looks like that maybe the Pac-12 won't salvage it. It's just complete chaos, man, and things are changing by the minute almost. So
yeah, I don't look. This is all. Jeez. Big happenings at the house.
Hey, it's okay, man. Life happens, man.
So predictable. Their leadership is so bad, and nothing surprises me. They were never going to get a grant of rights signed because Washington and Oregon are looking at this as an opportunity to move. They were never going to sign anything. No way. It just wasn't going to happen. So here we are. It's we're getting into this thing and it's playing out exactly like how we thought. It's just taking longer because they can't make up any of their minds. They're just so hapless at this.
Right. Yeah, it's very intriguing in that. In your mind, what do you see, Tim? At the end of the day, when all this shakes out, do you think the Big 12 ends up landing all four of the corner schools, or how do you think this plays out in your mind?
I don't know. I don't know. I thought they would, and then I think they wouldn't. I just wonder if there comes a point. I don't know what that is. There comes a point when Brett Yormark's just going to walk away, just going to say, "I'm done with this. This is, I'm done waiting on you," and maybe go invite UConn, and maybe we're getting there. And I think he's got to get his own presidents on board with this. That we got to move on. We can't keep waiting on Utah and Arizona State. We expect Arizona they're in, unless again there's some miracle at the last second.
Right. Yeah, I think UConn's definitely back in play now. At least from what I'm seeing online, and if this whole thing falls apart with Arizona State or even Arizona, if Arizona decides not to come, if the board won't approve them because of Michael Crow and his stubbornness, then maybe UConn is back in play. Who knows?
Yeah. It could well be that. It could well be that they're just going to have to go a different direction or just stay at 14. They're fine at 14. Yeah. They're happy with 14.
Right.
So we'll see how this all plays out.
My gut is Arizona's going to end up coming, though, regardless of what Arizona State does. At least that's kind of the way it seems to be trending anyway. But as far as the Big Ten goes, have you heard anything, Tim, from your sources about the Oregon-Washington thing?
No. I mean, it's hard to read exactly what the Big Ten's doing because we heard Cal, Stanford too, and now they backed off of that. Honestly, Coos, what's going on here is utter confusion about the ACC situation. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like everyone's like, hold on, what's going on? If Florida State really blows up the ACC, which is one scenario, it's going to be a free-for-all for all these conferences to bring in schools. So I think everyone's like, we want to expand. We want to add some schools to, maybe increase our exposure or footprint. But they also just kind of want to hold off and see what happens with the ACC because there's so many great opportunities there. There's just so many schools that, might fit in very well into what you're trying to do as a conference, whether it's the SEC trying to expand their footprint within their geographical area or, the Big Ten trying to get into more new areas. They got LA, they want Florida. How's that all play out? And then at the end of the day, there's going to be maybe the ACC regathers itself in a smaller form. Maybe it merges with the remnants of the Pac-12. But I think there's an opportunity there for the Big 12 to add schools too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, and it probably won't happen right now, but within the next 10 years or so, we're going to see total just teams moving all over the place.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I think we'll see teams moving all over the place. And do you think we ultimately end up at a Power 2, Tim, or do you think the Big 12 is going to be able to sustain itself and continue to stay at the quote-unquote big boy table?
I think there's going to be a Power 3. And that's, at the end of the day, Brett Yormark's basketball play, it has multiple purposes here. First of all, it gets him into other areas of the country. He wants him, bigger East Coast presence in some areas, and that's more basketball. But it also extends the power of the Big 12. if you become undeniably the boss of basketball, you can't break off and leave the NCAA tournament behind.
Right.
I mean, you got to bring the Big 12 with you. It just wouldn't be tangible. It's like having a football playoff without the SEC. Nobody's going to believe it's the real thing. So
right.
Look, let's be blunt here. If the Big Ten and SEC think they can form their own little division, well, they're going to neglect half of America. We won't care, and they'll just beat the snot out of each other, leading to a lot of programs that are used to winning having a lot of losses, and that just won't work. They need the Big 12 because they will view us as fodder. They'll view us as someone that they can take advantage of, and that's probably why exactly they'll keep us around. I think the dream that some have had, almost like a teenage boy fever dream of having all my favorite teams in one playoff, just this whole weird thing going on with these nerd journalists and other people. It's not going to happen. You can't exclude most of the United States from your grand plans and expect it to work. They'll just be in a major revolt.
Right. Scotty B. the Bader King says Oregon and Washington could be Big Ten bound per Brett McMurphy. Scotty, thank you for that update, buddy. We appreciate it. And I had a question here too from one of my listeners here. Since we are live, we're in real time here. Anthony Manzano says, Coos and Tim, if Miami, Clemson, Florida State, and North Carolina are able to get out of the grant of rights around 27 or 28, what is the most realistic combination for the Big Ten to get out of the ACC?
Well, I think everyone, if you're looking at the Big Ten, I think the Florida play is interesting. I think they'd want both Florida State and Miami if they could, but these major university institutions like North Carolina and Virginia would be at the top of their list. That's their MO. They want the big schools, the big research schools. Now both of them might have Board of Regents issues with that. I know Virginia is tied to Virginia Tech according to their state attorney general. There's talk that North Carolina might be tied to North Carolina State, and so that really shuffles things. Now if you're the SEC, you might be able to get Virginia because you'll take Virginia Tech. That's really who you want. But and let's be honest, when you're reforming the Confederacy, you got to have Virginia. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's what the SEC's footprint is. And it does shuffle it. Does the Big Ten want both Florida schools, and then who else do they want? Maybe they just want that. Maybe that's it. How's Clemson fit into this? Because they're not known as an academic overlord. Right. I mean, they're kind of I don't know if they're land grant, but they're kind of that feel. So I'm not sure where that'll lead. And there will be a draft, a scramble of sorts, a free agency. And unfortunately, the Big 12's the Kansas City Royals, my team. You can't afford anyone the big guys want. And that's the great irony of all of this is there's desirable brands within these conferences that overall as a brand, as a conference, is struggling. Right. And there's a lot of schools that the Big 12 would want out of the ACC, but it all starts with who the Big 10 wants, not the SEC, ironically, who the Big 10 wants, because the presidents, as we've said, make the decisions. They're the academic people, so they want to be associated with that. Then the SEC will pick four, and then the remaining schools have to realize, do we try to stick together in our final six people and add some schools, or do we just go ahead and four of us hop on over to the Big 12?
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned the SEC there. I have a feeling if, Sankey has been adamant, we're not interested in expanding right now. But, I mean, they all say that, right? I mean, what else are they going to say? Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to poach a team from X conference.
Don't start with Greg Sankey. Yeah. The whole year now. Quit expanding. Quit stealing other people's programs.
Yeah. Really. Yeah, he's been, which is kind of a different conversation, but he's been taking subtle shots at Brett Yormark ever since Brett Yormark got here. But anyway,
he's scared of him. Yeah, he's intimidated by him. Yep.
But if Big Ten goes out and grabs Oregon and Washington and gets to 18, I have a hard time feeling like the SEC is just going to sit back and do nothing at that point.
I agree.
You think they would? Now the problem is the teams they probably want are in the ACC, and can they get them? Because that grant of right, maybe Florida State figures this thing out. Who knows? But if they don't, then who does the SEC take? I don't think there's any. No offense, I mean you and I are Big 12 guys, but I don't think there's any teams in the Big 12 that would move the needle enough for the SEC right now.
No, I've heard talk of Oklahoma State. No, they've
right.
got they feel like they've got Oklahoma and Texas
Right.
A&M. They don't need any more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, West Virginia at one point in time, we just about got into the SEC back in 2011, but Mizzou got our spot, and I don't think it's on the table for us at this point. Our programs are down, and now that the TV revenue money has went up so much, I don't know that we're not going to bring $70-80 million worth of revenue to the table. I love my team, but I'm also realistic.
That's exactly right. I saw a study a long time ago. It's probably a year. I mean, that's how the realignment feels like. It was forever ago, a year ago, that broke down the schools that actually would improve the Big Ten situation, and it was basically Notre Dame. They've got their bar risen so high that nobody really brings added value. They're going to be in the middle or bottom. And I guess Oregon and Washington bring more of the nationwide scope. The Big Ten right now is kind of like that friend you had in grade school when you got into like a dare contest. This dude would do anything and you were going to lose. You tried to keep up. Look, if you try to keep up with the Big Ten expanding, you won't, because look, I believe 16 is the perfect number for a conference in the modern era. I think it's easy to schedule, although the SEC screwed it up. We'll see it at the Big 12 level. I believe that when you can play, 3 rivals a year and play everyone home and home series in a 4-year period. I mean, the SEC didn't even do that at 14 or whatever number they were at. They can't figure out a schedule. They're only going to do 8 games, which is ridiculous. 16 is the sweet spot for me. It's as someone who enjoys the mathematics of scheduling.
Right.
18 is doable. 20 gets cumbersome. 24 is you're just in a giant, 2 giant 12-team conferences. You're hardly going to play some schools. But it looks like if everything broke up, the Big Ten's fine going to 24. And I don't think the SEC and Big 12 in any apocalyptic scenario for college sports, I don't think there's any way they'd go to 24. I think the most we'll see them go to is 20. Now, the basketball play might get the Big 12 to 24 for basketball and other sports, but that's different than what we're talking about. Having 24 football schools, man, you're just not going to see everyone. You might as well not even be in the same conference. You're just going to have almost conference games that feel like non-conference games because you're playing teams that you never play.
Right. Yeah. You put something up the other day. I don't remember if it was on Twitter or maybe on the 24/7 board about the scheduling model if we were at 16 teams. Do you recall what I'm referring to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you mind kind of just rehashing that a little bit?
I alluded to it. It's an interesting thing. If you can break a conference into 4, and I know some people hate the word pods, but 4 scheduling groupings. They're just behind the scenes. There's no standings with them or anything. And originally they were talking about UConn, which would have been the 4th Eastern team with West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF. Now they're talking about taking all 4 of the 4 corner schools, which gets you 5 out west and 3 in east. And it gets a little sticky because you got to gravitate someone over that direction. But it's a challenge to figure out how to schedule that way. But if you were 4 west, 4 east, 4 plains, 4 Texas, it makes so much sense. You want to play the teams around you, and if you're Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State, and Kansas, you want to play each other every year in football. I mean, that's your tradition. If you're out west, you want to play every year. And then you just simply play 2 teams out of the other 4-team groupings every season. And you, of course, we'll do home and home, and you'll flip those teams and then move on to the other 2. What's really cool about it is when you're in a national conference like the Big 12 is about to become, there's a lot of people. Can you imagine playing, Tucson to Stores and for a game? Well, you're only going to travel on the road outside of your pod once a year. I mean, to each pod. The East 1 year, you only go west to the Plains or Texas once a year. They'll have someone come to you. It really does cut down on scheduling. And the way the Big 12's got everything lined up with having Thursday and Friday night slots, you can put those cross-country games in those slots so that they have more recovery time. But it's a really elegant, easy scheduling model. And then when you're at an 18-game basketball schedule, it's so easy. You play your teams in your grouping, your pod twice a year. You want home and away between, the old Big 8 schools here around here. And then you play everyone once and you're at 18. It's that simple.
Right.
I mean, 16 is the easiest number to schedule with, and the SEC managed to screw it up by only going to 8 games because I'm going to say it, they're cowards and they want their cupcakes to build up their resumes and look better than they are.
Yeah, I hear you. Real quick, I got to take care of some housekeeping, and then we'll get back to that discussion real quick. I want to give a shout out to my channel sponsor here, Dutch Miller Automotive Group. This episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. And by the way, folks, for those of you who live out in Kansas, they actually have a location in El Dorado, Kansas.
Really?
They do. Yep. I found that out when I was on their website the other day. So
that's interesting.
I found that interesting. It's kind of an outlier location for them, but they also have one in Bristol, Tennessee. They have one in Wytheville, Virginia, which is right across the West Virginia line, and then they have one in Charlotte, North Carolina as well. So anyway,
nice.
So guys,
I wonder what the tie to El Dorado, Kansas is.
I don't know. If I ever get a chance, good. I'm supposed to have their owner on my show at one point. If I do, I'm going to ask him that question.
Yep, it's not far from Wichita, but it's a small town.
Yeah, I had been calling it El Dorado, and somebody corrected me. So,
yeah, it's I like to call it El Dorado, just because I'm a jerk. But
El Dorado, that's funny. But anyway, back to the scheduling part. What you talked about is basically what the Big 12 has been doing for West Virginia for the last several years in basketball. I mean, Bob Huggins requested, number one, the first couple games of Big 12 conference play is always during January when they're not in class. So he always requested that they play at least 2 of their games during that time frame because then they don't have to worry about missing class.
Right.
And the Big 12, for the most part, has honored that. So they almost, I don't want to say always, but most seasons, West Virginia, if you'll notice, plays their first 2 conference games on the road.
Interesting.
And they'll make one road trip. So they might go to Kansas State on a Saturday, and then that Monday or Tuesday they might play at Oklahoma State, for example, or Kansas or somewhere out there out that direction. So that knocks out 2 of their away games right off the top, right? And then they also try to give them, if they have to play a Saturday, Monday game, they typically try to make those back-to-back as well to where they don't have to travel, in
between
so many times. So basically what you were talking about, they're not making any more trips. They just have to go a little further when they do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And use more bus. They have to they're probably on a bus a few more times than they would like to be, but
the phrase travel partners is kind of dated. And it really often applies to non-big revenue sports. But I think it comes into play here kind of in the reverse, not necessarily you travel with each other, but if you're Cincinnati and you're playing some road games, you're going to probably play Arizona and Arizona State in the same week on the road. So you can just go there and stay and do remote classes and play the 2 games. Kansas State started doing that with Texas trips. They'll always have at least one Texas trip where there's 2 opponents on the road, and they'll just stay down there if the timing is right with school. And you'll see more of that, and that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of a fan of adding USF to the conference, because it gives a second presence in Florida for recruiting, but also then when you go to play basketball or whatever sport it is. In Orlando, you can hop over to Tampa and squeeze in another game and head home. And it's efficient. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure the Big 12 will be investigating it. It makes scheduling even more confusing, though.
It does. And come on, Tim. We all know you just want to go to Tampa. You want to go to the beach, man.
Yes.
Let's face it.
Well, that's why I'm a big fan of a proponent of not inviting all Pac-12 schools and inviting UNLV. I know they don't bring much to the table for athletics, but they do bring a lot to the table for me.
Absolutely. I've said the same thing, man. Because I love it. Gives me an excuse I think I need to go to Vegas and watch this game.
It's work. Yeah, it's work. I gotta go. It's work. I gotta go.
But in all honesty, USF, even though they may not quote unquote bring much to the table from an athletic standpoint, it is a great location. No lie. I mean, I actually have family that lives in that area, and it's not a long drive at all to get from Orlando. No. It's only a couple hours. Actually, I don't think it's even 2 hours to get from Orlando to Tampa. So,
and it's a great rivalry. There's a few things people misunderstand about conference realignment. It's not about markets anymore, even though Tampa's a good market. It's really about rivalries and quality inventory for your partners. That's why it's important. People are like, well, we already have BYU in Arizona. Why do we need Utah and Arizona State? Because those games are going to get huge ratings. Because if you're just flipping around channels and you see a rivalry, they're going at it. And you stop on it. And that's, just viewing habits. If you see a rivalry game, look, I would never watch. I don't typically watch Mississippi or Mississippi State. But over the Thanksgiving weekend, you want to put the Egg Bowl on? I'm going to watch it because I know these two teams hate each other.
Right.
So I think the more of that you can get, and also another layer to it is where can you put your flag down as a conference? You already have it in Orlando. If you could put it in Tampa too and have that Central Florida corridor under the Big 12 flag, that is huge for recruiting in all sports. It's an amazing area for athletes. And then you can branch out further through Florida. It just makes things easier. And also, I think the final aspect, Kuz, that people don't look at is so much as, fans are like, they react to who's hot right now. That's who I want. And really, if you're doing it the right way, you need to look at the potential of the program. And that's what I think intrigues Brett Yormark about UConn. He sees a giant upside. There's no bigger upside in college athletics right now than UCF because they've showed the forward momentum. But I think USF could be in that category too if they kind of gather themselves, build that on-campus stadium. I think their upside as an institution is incredible. And don't underestimate the presence of UCF getting Big 12 money having an influence on what Florida State's doing right now. They're pissed. Little old UCF, the ones that, just that commuter school, they're going to be making more media rights money than Florida State. And that's hard for them to stomach, and I think that's playing a role in their decision making.
I totally agree with that, and that's remember, and I have the same thing about UConn. A lot of people aren't crazy about the UConn idea, but when UConn was in the Big East, when the Big East was considered a quote unquote power conference in football, a BCS conference, at the time technically, they actually won the league a couple of times and went to BCS bowl games, or at least one I know of. So when they have the right resources and the right coach, I think they can be. I'm not going to say they're not going to dominate the Big 12, and they're probably not even going to win year in, year out. But they can be competitive, in my opinion, if they have the right resources. And if you give them Big 12 resources, then I think they can. And let's look at on the basketball side. I mean, who's going to say no to UConn basketball, men's and women's, for that matter?
I know it's a huge part of what the conference needs to become. Brett Yormark seeing the entire playing field. He knows that college football is so brand driven with, like viewing habits. My generation and older, we grew up watching these teams, and a lot of journalists are doing the same thing. Well, we got to have the brands. You're not going to make up for that. You're not going to, even if Kansas State or West Virginia goes on a roll and starts getting into the college football playoff, they are a long way from considered the kind of brand of a Clemson. Let alone you'll never be the blue bloods, that have that Nebraska and can't screw it up, and UCLA seemingly can't screw it up. But basketball, you can close the financial gap to a degree. Maybe it's only $5 million a year, but maybe it's 10 if you put together a great basketball package and sell that contract separately. But also, as I mentioned, if you have the basketball prestige, I can't leave you out. You've got to be in the conversation.
Right. Absolutely. This comment from NE. Thank you for the comment, NE. It says, breaking news. The Big Ten is on a meeting and have agreed to add Washington and Oregon as full members. The holdup was with financial situation, but Fox has given the okay and will give more money. NE, please let me know in the comments if you're still on here where that information came from, which reporter, if you don't mind. And also, I had a comment up here I wanted to get to. Anthony Manzano, he says, let's hypothetically say the Big Ten or SEC decides they don't want North Carolina. How about the Big 12 getting North Carolina, Duke, NC State, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and Virginia?
I think a good pitch for Brett Yormark would be to go to North Carolina and NC State and Duke and say, look, no other conference is going to keep you together. No other conference is going to emphasize basketball like the Big 12. For now, the payout's going to be less, but adding you might, significantly raise that basketball payout. And if they do happen to bring in UConn with that, and then they go through a tiered basketball only, adding Gonzaga and Villanova and maybe St. John's to get more into that New York market. Because if the ACC collapses, Notre Dame's going to need a home for its other sports. It looks like they're going to stay independent of football. Well, the Big 12 would be a perfect parking spot for everything else because they're literally going to have that version of schools that don't play football in your conference. Right. They're up to 4 of them, maybe just 2, but it's part of his play, and I think it's a brilliant move.
Yeah. I'm a little bit, me being an old Big East guy, I am a little bit nervous about that whole basketball only thing. I mean, I'm sure you know the history of that whole deal.
Yeah. And you look at the ACC; they've gotten too committed to basketball, and they forgot that football actually pays the bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's what's leading to all this.
Yeah,
Florida State and Clemson, the football powers, or at least the biggest football brands, are just sick of it. Basketball can't lead the way; it has to work in unison. And if you lose perspective of that, you're going to get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, I would think the presidents in the Big 12, even if Yormark does, I know he's a basketball guy, so if he starts getting a little bit too far out there on that, maybe they can rein him back in.
Yep, they do.
Let's hope so.
He's a wild card. He'll just go off there like, nope, that's not going to work. But then again, he comes up with great ideas like the Pro Day, the combine down in Dallas for the entire conference. It's brilliant. He's a free thinker, and sometimes it's crappy ideas, and sometimes it's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just trying to see if there's any updates on here real quick while we're okay. But yeah, the news about the Big Ten meeting was reported by Brett McMurphy about Washington and Oregon expected to be Big Ten bound. That seems like that's pretty much the latest that I've seen.
One of the things I think that's come out of this whole realignment is we've learned who really has sources.
Yeah.
We've learned who actually has the insider info, and Brett McMurphy, certainly we've known that, but it's proven again.
Right. Yeah.
And who's just kind of parroting what they're hearing on social media and putting it out as their sources. I rarely claim to have sources. I joke that I've got, in terms of conference realignment, I've got the worst AD. He doesn't leak anything because he just Gene Taylor completely trusts Brett Yormark. So he didn't even call to check in. I mean, just whatever, he thinks Brett is doing everything, moving the conference in the right direction. So it's like when I asked him, because I really don't know. When something happens, he'll call me. It's like, okay, that's great. Everyone's got all these leaks. I'm like, why am I covering the school that has no leaks? Why? I just don't get it.
Yeah, West Virginia doesn't leak very, very much either, to be honest with you. They're pretty good about keeping things tight to the vest. More so than a lot of other schools.
Yeah.
And I've even been, I don't want to say warned, but encouraged not to talk about the whole West Virginia ACC stuff that's been out there because the school won't appreciate it. So,
well, look, there was a moment when that made sense for West Virginia, but this isn't the moment.
Not now. No, it is not.
It's clear. It's already the weaker conference in terms of revenue. I mean, we know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And football, it's exponentially weaker, if you ask me, because so many of the programs just aren't very good anymore. But yeah, it'd be crazy to even consider it at this point.
Yeah, and with the college landscape changing so rapidly, why in the world would you want to tie yourself down to a deal that's 13, 14 years old, or in length?
If that
would be insane.
No, nobody wants to go in. People are trying to get out of that deal. Why would someone want to go into that?
Exactly. So West Virginia is they're perfectly fine where they are for now, in my opinion. Obviously, any school is going to run if the Big Ten or SEC comes calling, but
absolutely,
that's not happening for us. So we need to stay where we are and enjoy the ride. I think the Big 12 is in a good spot. I think it's going to be exciting basketball, exciting football going forward. I think it's a conference that any given year, any team can win the league. At least the way it's constituted today. I think Colorado will be better now that they're back in the Big 12. I think Arizona's on the upswing if they come in. I think they're good additions as far as keeping the competition level, fairly equal. The parity. I think the parity is going to remain pretty much the same with those ads.
I agree. And
So
they'll get into Texas and recruit.
Yep.
I mean, that's huge for them. I think
Absolutely.
that's a big part of Colorado's wanting to come back. But I know the Arizona schools are already recruiting Texas, but when you're playing in Texas every year and playing Texas teams every year, it's going to help you a lot in a really fertile recruiting area that there's so much talent that it's no way for any one conference to eat it all up.
Right. Anthony's got a question. He says, what teams realistically fit the philosophy of the Big Ten if the Big Ten decided to poach teams? I'll answer it first. I think not a lot, really. The Big 12 is a lot different from a academic, cultural perspective than the Big Ten. They have just different philosophies.
Right.
But I think Kansas probably would, just because they're an AAU member. Maybe they would be close to that. The only other one Colorado, I guess, if you want to consider them a member now. They're another AAU school. They have really high academic rankings and that kind of thing that the Big Ten cherishes. But outside of those two, I'm not really sure anybody fits it. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I would have told you a year ago, if Kansas gets a Big Ten bid, they're gone, and maybe that's still true. But the basketball play becomes interesting. How does that look if Kansas leaves the conference that's the best in basketball?
Right.
That won't make much sense.
Right.
And Nebraska is such a cautionary tale. Missouri less so, but and Colorado kind of proves it too. You leave what you know behind and go to the unknown, and it has not worked out. Nebraska football has turned into just an afterthought, and it'll always be one of the true blue bloods of college football. You can't take away the history from it, but I would argue that move to the Big Ten has been one of the worst things to happen to Nebraska athletics in the history of the school. Missouri, too, has not only made their football, now that they kind of settled in, they're getting their butts kicked, but their basketball is so much less important than it was in the Big 8 and Big 12. I think sometimes you forget who you are and where you've been when you make these changes. And I'm sure the money's nice, but wouldn't be, playing competitive football with schools with which you have history, be nice too. And I think we might be coming to that point at some point, as long as there's not a Big Two and not just two conferences, that some schools might make the decision, look, K-State gets invited to the SEC. I don't know if that's best. I don't know if leaving this and making it a couple extra bucks would be the best thing for a school like Kansas State. So I don't know where we're headed with all this.
Right. I like this comment by Jason Spangler. He says, Brett McMurphy got somebody in the Pac-12 meetings wearing one of those eye contacts from Batman. He's on top of it, isn't he?
It's incredible. His sources are absolutely amazing. And the key to his sourcing is you never get a clue who his sources are. So they're completely protected. And he's really good about that. Yeah,
he is. He really is. Scotty B, I disagree with his comment, man. I love you, but he says the Big 12 basketball will be good. Yeah, it would be good, but it wouldn't be elite like it is now. Look, as much as I don't like Kansas basketball, I've got to give them kudos, man. I mean, they've carried the torch for the conference for the most part for 2 decades.
Well, what we've seen, a lot of conferences, when one or two teams gets really good, everyone just kind of settles into their role. We've seen it with, Big Ten football. I mean, you got two major things, and then everyone else is like, okay, we're trying to get to the championship. Kansas set such a high bar in basketball for everyone. I mean, it was the best program from year to year in the nation. And everyone's risen to meet that. Kansas hasn't come back to the conference. The conference has risen up to Kansas, and that's what's really cool about it. Now you've got all these programs, Baylor winning a national championship and K-State going to the Elite Eight, and you've got other programs that have thrived in college basketball. And bluntly put, it's all because of Kansas's presence and setting that bar so high. I
Absolutely.
just can't imagine them if they really add Arizona and the Yukon and maybe another Big East team. I just can't see Kansas leaving that kind of challenge and moving on to something else.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think they're happy where they are, and obviously, like I said, there's not a lot of teams that wouldn't go to the Big Ten or SEC if they had the opportunity, because the money is just so drastically, much more. But I think other than that, Kansas is pretty content. At least I hope so. Hopefully, they don't have eyes for something else. But JD says, should we take UConn? I'm kind of selfish, but as a West Virginia guy, I'd like to have UConn in the league. I don't think you can take UConn ahead of Arizona or Arizona State or Utah. But, if none of those schools come, or if just Arizona comes, or Arizona and Arizona State, and you need to get back to an even number, then I think UConn, it helps balance you out a little geographically. It gets you into a new market, gives you an elite basketball brand, which is what Brett wants. And they do have a football program. No, they're not great, but they do have one. And I think with Jim Moore Jr. at the helm, if he stays, they have an opportunity to be competitive.
I agree.
In the future.
I agree. Again, look for the upside. And basketball's tremendous. It brings a whole new level of importance to women's basketball, which isn't a big revenue producer. But if you've got really good women's basketball, it can be a little fraction of your TV contract that they want to have those type
Right.
of games. I'm a fan of adding UConn, but only at this point in the scenario of you get to 14. And I think based on what's happened in the Pac-12, Brett Yormark might accept Arizona and go, okay, we're going to wait. We're just going to see what happens here.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get in a situation where Utah says, okay, we're in. We're not messing around. We're in the Big 12's at 15. And then Michael Crow at Arizona State's like, well, I don't know. Maybe we need to stay out west. Then you go, okay, UConn, you're in.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get to an awkward number, if Arizona bails on you, to UConn. They're available, and it's a good trump card to play because I think they'll bring something to the table that's unique for this conference, which is just that basketball history combined with a presence in New York and a foot in the door with ESPN. People got to realize how many people in that ESPN headquarters in Connecticut went to UConn. They may not be the on-air talent, but they're behind the scenes pushing a lot of buttons and pulling a lot of weight. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. Everyone, just a reminder, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see club level VIP members. That's the $4.99 level channel membership here at Kuz's Corner. If you want to become a member, go to hit the join button right below here and go check that out. Also, I have a pub level, which is the $2.99 level. I want to thanks to all of my supporters there. If you want to become a member of that club, just go ahead and hit join. And there's a few perks that go along with being a channel member here. Tim, let's talk Kansas State football real quick, man, before I let you out of here.
Okay.
Kansas State picked by a lot of outlets to be most people have Texas as a top team. Obviously that's nothing new, but Kansas State is picked by a lot of outlets to be number 2 and to play in that Big 12 title game. Do you think that's realistic expectations for the Wildcats this year?
I do. I think this is going to be a really good team again. And a big part of that is Will Howard at quarterback. I'm just continue to be amazed at how people, when they list the top quarterbacks in the conference, let alone country, forget Will Howard. He came in, mid-season with injuries to Adrian Martinez and started winning football games. I mean, he just absolutely thrashed Oklahoma State. Of course, the win in the Big 12 championship. I think one of his better wins was at West Virginia when things didn't go right. West Virginia did play pretty well that day. He had a couple turnovers.
Yeah.
And yet he fought through that and found a way to lead the team to victory. And I think that's more of his growth. I don't know how you leave him off much. I think he's a really important part. They returned their entire offensive line between the COVID year and Cooper Beebe, not deciding not to go to the NFL draft early. They've got their entire line back. In fact, they picked up an injured lineman. And anytime you're good at quarterback and offensive line, you're going to be okay. They return key pieces on defense. They've got some things to shore up. But I think it's going to be a really good K-State team. And while I accept and understand why everyone has picked Texas, the talent is undeniable. I remain steadfastly, I got to see it to believe it. They just haven't been in the Big 12 championship for a very long time. They even screwed it up last year and left the door open for K-State, and K-State took advantage of it. I think the Big 12 championship is going to be K-State and Tech. I think K-State will lose at Texas. I believe they will, because now Texas is really focused on K-State after years of looking past them and losing. But while I accept Texas is really talented, I still don't believe them. I can't get there. And one of the things I'm looking forward to the most with the new Big 12 is the shuffling of those in the media who are voting in the poll, because they're so heavy with the folks that cover Texas and Oklahoma. It's reflected in the polls, and we're going to see a more balanced polling from here on out.
That's interesting. I had not considered that aspect of it, but maybe that's why they've been so wrong so many times, right?
Yep. I mean, there's been a giant shift in media, and I don't deny that being in the Fan magazine, now the Fan website space, that my focus is mostly on Kansas State. But now I'm seeing traditional media become, honestly, just homers. They're just, because they know to survive, they have to pander. They're not breaking any big stories against the well wishes of their university. It's kind of funny how everything's moved, but they will vote lockstep with everything's great at Texas. They're going to be mighty again. And there's a lot of them, and that's why it's reflected in those conference polls.
Yeah. And one of the things a lot of people are talking about with K-State is obviously the loss of Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about that at all? Do you think they're going to take a step back in the run game, or even heck, he was even big in the pass game. But
yeah.
Do you see the offense taking a step back at all?
The challenge isn't replacing the numbers from down to down of rushing and passing. They'll do that. They've got a good backup from him, DJ Giddens from last year, who is a little bit bigger guy. They brought in a Florida State transfer that is kind of on the small side. I think they're going to be fine, but I do think replicating the big play impact that Deuce brought is going to be the challenge, and who makes those big plays. If you go back to the Big 12 championship, and he had the nice touchdown run against TCU in which he put a safety on skates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that play was supposed to go to the other side of the field, but he started that way. TCU had flowed that way, and he just cut it back against and found a gap and just was gone. And that's just stuff Deuce does. Deuce does
right.
Deuce things, and he'll do it in the NFL for the Cowboys now. People will be amazed at him. So replicating that's difficult, but I also think they're going to just trust in Will Howard in the passing game a little bit more than they needed to last year with Deuce out there.
Yeah. And I thought that running back, the backup you mentioned, about, Giddens, I think he's actually I think he's really good. I think he might be better than people think. I mean, Deuce was just so elite.
Right.
Everybody just assumes, they're not going to be as good. Well, they can change the offensive game plan based on their personnel.
Absolutely.
And just like you said, rely more on Will Howard. And I think Giddens has the potential to be a really, really good running back. If not one of the top in the conference.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that is constantly going forward. You hit him at 2 yards deep, he's going to get back to the line of scrimmage. He just powers forward, and he picks up a lot of first downs. He made some big plays and late game situations when they just needed to grind and pick up yards. When Deuce got banged up, the offense really didn't miss a beat. He'd go out there. He's a good receiver too. He's just a good athlete, and he's kind of developed as a complete, performer. Can you pick up the blitz? Can you do this and that? He's kind of layered that all in, and he's getting there. So I think K-State's offense is going to be fine. My questions are more on the defensive side, and I think they'll find a way. And special teams, they really turned when they decided to use Ty Zentner as not just their punter, but also for kickoffs, which he did really well. And then when they put him in the field goal situation, they took off because he was so reliable, and he won the Big 12 championship by just burying a field goal.
Right. Yeah. I'm expecting K-State. I'll be honest with you. I'm glad we don't have to play you guys this year.
I'm disappointed. This new rotation, we lost West Virginia and Oklahoma. I'm kind of pissed about the Oklahoma thing, that their last year in a conference with Kansas State, they don't play. I think that's kind of BS. K-State does play Texas. I don't know why that wasn't reversed. You should be saying goodbye to the teams you played for a very long time.
Yeah, we're the opposite. We play Oklahoma, not Texas. So we had the opposite thing as you guys. We don't play Kansas. We don't play Kansas State. We don't play Texas. And we don't play Iowa State, unfortunately.
So you play all the newcomers.
We do. All four of them.
That is wild.
I think we're one of only. I think there's 2 of us maybe that do it, maybe 3. I can't remember, but yeah, we're one of the few.
That's crazy. Yeah, K-State has UCF and Houston coming to town, so I don't even get a new road trip. I'm like, really? Nobody's thinking of me. Coos, nobody thinks of me. I want to go to Orlando.
They need to consult you before they make these schedules, man.
Exactly.
You've got to get on the phone to. Was it Gene Thompson? Gene Taylor,
yeah.
Gene Taylor. Sorry.
Yeah.
You get on the phone with Gene Taylor and say, Gene, man, come on, you got to do better than this.
Well, then basketball schedules an opening game against USC, and it was supposed to be Bronny James, but we'll see if he plays after his.
Yeah, man, I hated to hear that. I'm not a LeBron James guy, but I feel for that situation.
Yeah,
as a dad, I cannot imagine what he went through.
With K-State's history with Keontae Johnson, having that game, actually picks up some meaning now with that. But that game is the Monday after the Texas football game. And I'm like, couldn't you have made it someone else? So I'm not going to the Texas football game because I have volunteered, again, as the theme continues, to go to Vegas for work. And, I think it's a sacrifice we all should make for our coworkers.
That's right. That's right. I actually do. I'm not a credential media member, but I do have plans. The wife and I have bought tickets to go see the UCF game at the Bounce House when West Virginia goes to Orlando. So I'm excited about it.
Fun.
It's going to be.
The great thing about having them in the conference is there will always be flights available, and there will always be hotel rooms available.
Yep. You got that right.
Never have problems getting to that destination.
Yep. Well, listen, Fitz, it's been awesome, man. One more time, let everybody know where to find you at, where they can come support your work.
Yeah, GoPowerCat.com on the 24/7 Sports Network. They're having a sale right now at 60% off if you're a K-Stater. If you're not a K-Stater, your school's having the same sale, so you can go sign up for that site. But most of all, if you've enjoyed this, go subscribe to our YouTube channel. It doesn't cost you anything. It's, just hit that subscribe button as we're trying to get over the 10K mark before football. So if you can give us a follow, I do daily deliveries. I've been really focused on conference realignment lately. I wander more into K-State, but I do a lot of Big 12 and college athletics topics with a daily delivery. Deep Purple videos. We're going to do some lives in the fall. So come over to the Go Power Cat channel and give us a follow. And Kuz, I appreciate so much you having me on your really wonderful show. You do a great job with this.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll hopefully we can do it again sometime. And I really appreciate you coming on. Once again, everybody, don't forget to go check out our channel sponsor, Dutch Miller Automotive, if you're in the hunt for a new car. Like I said, if you're a Kansas person, they have a location in El Dorado, and they have locations throughout the whole state of West Virginia. So go check them out. And whether it's service, you need to get your car serviced, or you're in the market for a new ride, go check them out. DutchMillerAuto.com. Well, Tim, thanks again, man. Everybody, thank you for participating in the chat. Be sure to like the video on your way out. If you're watching on the replay, those likes still help. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Tim's channel. I think it's Go Power Cat. And with that being said, guys, we are out. Oh, and Q Country Roads. I can't leave that out.